Well, good evening, everyone. I hope I'm quite audible. I'd like to invite everyone in this beautiful evening to have a lovely interaction with our keynote speaker and the panelist. Though we know the panelist, we have had our another webinar that was a very successful one, and I hope many of our audience have gained and got advantage and good exercise in their personal life. And here with Digital Jesuits, the young scholastics come with another webinar, and with a very, very sensitive issue that sometimes we ignore or sometimes we don't admit, but somewhat whether we admit it or not, that is what we are. And we also conducted a survey, and many have responded very, very cordially and spontaneously. And after a short while, we will have that presentation, what is the percentage of it, and we'll proceed to the next step and our final program. Once again, I would like to invite our keynote speaker and the panelists and all our audience. Before we start to our the main program, I would like to invoke our Almighty Father's presence and blessings in our beautiful gathering, that with his blessings, we may succeed what we are intending. We'll pause for a while and invoke God's presence amidst us. Loving Father, we are grateful to you for this beautiful moment. We firmly believe that you are with us, you have been with us in these pandemic situations, in our loneliness, in our sufferings and pain and distressing moments. And you never forgot us. You never forsaken us. Whether we are amidst many people or we are with ourselves, myself. But you have been with us and you have guided us. We also pray that please be with us in this beautiful moment, that whatever discussion going to take place, may your wisdom, may your Holy Spirit guide us so that every one of us may be benefited from this beautiful discussion. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. So now here I go to the next program. I would like to introduce our moderator, Scholastic Ruel, who will be introducing our speakers and panelists. And okay, Scholastic Ruel is in Bangalore. He's a scholastic from Darjeeling province. He's doing his master's in political science. And he has a very keen interest in conflict resolution and youth for peace and studies. So I would like to invite Scholastic Ruel to take over the program and wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Newton. Am I audible?
Yes, very much.
Yeah, thank you. Wonderful prayer right there for turning our hearts and minds towards God. This evening, I would like to welcome at the outset all our panelists and all those attending this very, very important discourse on tackling loneliness. It has been such a joy actually talking to the three panelists prior to this meeting, both Ryan, Jasmine, and Sister Lippy, who I'll be introducing in a while. The joy because we were able to pinpoint that over the past 3 years, if there has been one word which has become a buzzword during the COVID pandemic, then it is perhaps mental health. And while this word has been rallying around, what is important in our discourse today is to understand what it means to each one of us. As I see the crowd that has logged in, I see many religious students, and we have been trained in many ways to draw a thin line of difference between loneliness and solitude. And we have also learned that pain somehow is a protective cover. Perhaps there are many prejudgments such as these, which our speakers will help clarify today. Therefore, I would like to make 3 requests to the audience right at the beginning. Please use the chat box. This is one forum where, as you get your insights and ideas and the need for clarification arises, you can use the chat box to address your queries to any of the speakers. And we too will call out some important questions perhaps, and then take it later when we have the panel discussion. Number 2, please mute your speakers and any background noise so that it's minimum disturbance for our speakers. And lastly, we would like to address as many questions as possible, but we have a time frame of about 90 minutes, I'm told. And then if we are unable to take many of these questions, perhaps you can have a bilateral conversation later on with any of the speakers. But let's try to keep the interactions lively and as personal as possible so that there are some key takeaways for each one of us. Having said that, let me go towards introducing our panel. This panel is unique in many ways. Unique because of the variety of perspectives that our 3 speakers are going to bring today. We have Gerard Ryan, a Jesuit from Ireland. I spoke to Gerard with regard to the topic that he's exposing, and he has been involved in studying this very closely. Right? He has joined Regis College in 2020, completed his doctoral studies in the Department of Theology and Religion, University of Oxford. He had very distinguished scholars who guided him, and he was also a visiting research fellow at Trinity College, Dublin. This year, he will be publishing a book, in fact, and I hope I have the liberty to say this: Mutual Accompaniment as Faith-Filled Living, a recognition of the vulnerable other. This is going to be his book, which will be published by Palgrave Macmillan. I cannot see Gerard at the moment. I hope your camera is functioning. Gerard, can you hear us?
He's there, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Wonderful. Then we also have Ms. Jasmine Wilson. Ms. Jasmine is not new to the Digital Jesuits Forum, and I will introduce her properly a little later, but I want to highlight that she has been in the field of counseling and psychotherapy for 8 years and counting. And the perspective that she brings in also has to enrich this discussion in a very profound manner. And we also have Sister Lippy Rosario. Sister Lippy is an adjunct faculty, Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology in the University of Dhaka. But what many of us may not know is that Sister is very famous for her YouTube videos, which deal with mental health and well-being. And she has made tremendous contributions to the International Journal of Psychology. Dear friends, this is the diversity that I was speaking about today, the diversity of our panelists. What we need to also know here is that we are not just professors and students, but we are religious, we are practitioners, industry practitioners, and these have great bearing. The discussions that we are going to have great bearing on what we deal with in day-to-day life. Therefore, without further ado, I would request Gerard Ryan to initiate this webinar on the shifting ecclesiological horizons, challenges, and opportunities. Gerard will be focusing particularly on loneliness within our church communities. And after that, we will proceed with the flow of the program by engaging the other panelists. Gerard, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that very kind introduction. Can people see the PowerPoint screen?
Yes, Gerard. Yeah.
Thank you. So just by way of introduction, quickly, the background to my own interest in this topic really occurred during the pandemic. And during the pandemic, especially in that first year, when so many of our countries were in lockdown and where people had to engage in social distancing, that a lot of people experience loneliness. And I know that too from my own parents during the COVID. So that kind of initiated my interest in the topic loneliness. And then one of the other things is in this past year, when things began to reopen a bit here in Toronto, you'd go into a bookshop and often, and more often than I'd seen before, you'd be coming across texts like this one, The Lonely Century. So I thought this is going to be an emerging topic. And then I began to think about it and maybe what religion can do, what's its relationship to loneliness. And I applied for a grant from the AAAS, which is the American Association for the Advancement of Science, to explore this question of loneliness. So part of this year for me is to learn about this and to in some way advance in a very modest and small way how we speak about it for those of us who identify as Christians. So that's the background to this talk. But I think also when we look at loneliness, there are more significant opportunities than challenges really moving forward if we begin to talk about loneliness in a more public way. So why should loneliness be a concern for our communities? Because often loneliness is not something someone will readily identify as experiencing. You know, people will identify more with saying, I have to go for an operation because I have a hernia, or I have to go to a dental appointment. I have to go and see a doctor because I haven't been sleeping well. But people will very rarely say, I have to go and speak to a doctor because I'm suffering from loneliness. It doesn't have that kind of comfort or ease within our societies at the moment. And that's a challenge for us as Christians. So why should we be concerned about loneliness? So if you listen to the words maybe of Pope Francis, who acknowledges loneliness, he says, the joy of the gospel fills the hearts and lives of all who encounter Jesus. And those who accept his offer of salvation are set free from sin, from sorrow, from inner emptiness and loneliness. So at the one level, Pope Francis is identifying that loneliness is part of the human condition. It's there. That means then, for any of us who experience loneliness, the propensity to loneliness probably ties us together quite strongly as a universal family. So we have that experience of loneliness. But what Pope Francis is also suggesting is that there is a way out of loneliness in a way, that there is a horizon before us that within our loneliness, perhaps we can see. And that horizon, of course, is Christ, who is our way out of loneliness. But we know too that we can't move out of loneliness and not move out with others, because we all live in communities, and we are born for community. We are born into families, and we have communities in our schools. So Christ is our way, but we go there together. And because we go there together, then we need each other's help in getting there. And it's important in a way to have an understanding of what loneliness is, to agree on a definition of it. And in general, the definition of loneliness is that it corresponds to a discrepancy between an individual's preferred and actual social relationships. So for instance, in my imagination, I would prefer that in the schoolyard that I'm playing football every day. But in reality, I'm not included. So my preference is to be playing football, but the reality that I haven't chosen is that I'm not included, and therefore I experience loneliness. So loneliness is never somebody's fault. It's a consequence of the social circumstances that we're presently in. And there are different types of loneliness. For instance, there is intimate loneliness. So when a husband loses a wife or a wife loses a husband, that's an intimate loneliness. When a child loses a parent, that's an intimate loneliness, because that's loneliness within families, which are extremely close units. But there's also relational loneliness. Like, for instance, if I lose a best friend to death, that's a relational loneliness. So it's not the same as the loneliness I experience within my family, but it is almost as strong when you think of it. When I lose a best friend, or when I lose a cousin. So some of us will already have experienced the pain of that relational loneliness. And then there's collective loneliness, where we all experience loneliness together. Like, for instance, COVID-19 has been an experience of collective loneliness right across our globe. We've all experienced the loneliness of not being able to attend funerals of loved ones. And that collective loneliness, in a way, gathers together the intimate loneliness and the relational loneliness that we experience. So we know now, and it's one of the opportunities of COVID, that all of us as an entire human family felt the same at the same time. We all experienced a collective loneliness. And we also know that there are effects of loneliness. And this is why loneliness is a very important issue for our Christian churches. It's also it should be a very important issue too for our governments, because there are effects of loneliness. There are physical effects of loneliness. When people are feeling lonely, they are less inclined to look after themselves in terms of their physical well-being. So there are effects of loneliness. We also know that there are psychiatric dysfunctions and psychosocial risk factors with loneliness. If people are so depressed in a particular moment, and loneliness is generated because of that depression, and in a way, if they are left alone in their loneliness, they always run the risk of thinking, I would be better off elsewhere. So there are problems with suicidal thoughts and loneliness too. So it is a significant social and medical issue for all of our communities. And we all have a responsibility of care for the whole person. We have to care for people in their loneliness too. And we also have to care for those who are on the margins and outside our communities. Again, COVID has taught us it's not just about caring for our immediate neighbor, but we have to care for the entire community in order for us collectively and individually to have a future and to have a secure well-being. So we might think of what kind of word would help us situate how we could be with each other in a time of loneliness. And I think the word is accompaniment. That's, in a way, the meaning of the word accompaniment is like to walk with somebody. Like, I will walk with you I will walk beside you. We will walk together. And how can I walk with somebody who suffers from loneliness? So we accompany them. And what do we do when we accompany somebody who is working through loneliness? We listen to them. And this is one of the great opportunities of our time when we are experiencing this global loneliness and living it in a particular way, that this is an opportunity for us to develop further our listening skills, both as individuals, but also as communities, as church, as societies, to simply walk with somebody and to listen deeply to them. And in doing that, we bring our light into their darkness. And as we move into their darkness in listening to them, we become changed too. Our horizon becomes broader. Our understanding and knowledge of those who suffer loneliness and what that means specifically becomes expanded. So we walk away transformed in knowledge, but also we walk away more empathetic. We begin to appreciate the transformative gift of softer values in our society, like kindness. And from that individual experience where two people or three are walking together, we begin to look at the question of a place of belonging and also how we can become possibly communities of recognizers. So that in a way, it's not just about my transformation or my change or your change and your transformation, but now it's how can we have this domino effect? Because this effect is a good effect. It is a liberating effect. It's a kind effect. So what happens when we are rescued from our loneliness? St. Augustine offers us a reminder. He says, our hearts are restless till they rest in thee, O God. So in a way, it's not about absolutely eradicating loneliness or its possibility, but rather it's about dealing with a level of loneliness, befriending that small level of loneliness that's in our lives, being okay with that level of loneliness in our lives, so that it doesn't become a massive loneliness in our lives. So we can, all of us will feel at sometimes an awkwardness socially. We might feel an awkwardness when we walk into a room of people. And in that moment, we're not really experiencing the weight of loneliness that frightens us. That experience of loneliness, we can deal with. We know how to befriend that, and we know how to move through it because we have relationships of connectivity and closeness already in our lives. And we always have loneliness, but we are now friends too. We're friends with silence and we're friends with alone time. We know too that part of experiencing what we have through COVID was taking those times of alone time to go for a walk, to be rejuvenated mentally, to begin to notice our neighborhoods and our cities and villages in a new way, in a way where we appreciated where we are and who lives amongst us. And in that space, we are able to thank God for that experience of appreciation for what we see around us as we have those moments of silence, of alone time. And as we experience that, even as we walk through a street, we ask God for the grace to see my present friendships as gift. Even in their struggles, even in their pains and sufferings, still to be able to see friendship always as gift. And out of that place of insight now that we have come from, that experience of how we befriend loneliness, loneliness is universal. Loneliness doesn't have to impede my life in terms of its progress. I can still be empowered. This now allows us in a way to think about not just our own advancement moving forward now, but to think also of my neighbors, because we know to love God, one sure pathway to loving God is loving neighbor. So we might want to think about who are those who are lonely around us. So if the people who are homeless or people who are divorced experience loneliness, people who belong to the LGBTQ community who identify as gay experience loneliness in our families and in our societies. People who are refugees into our countries, so they come into our countries and they have no support and they're all alone and they are so dependent upon the kindness of others. And we all know and recognize those who are amongst us who are in need of our help, who come to our countries. And also there are those who in church feel that the church is negatively politicized. And we have that a little bit here in North America, where there is a lot of tension around who is faithful and who is not faithful. And what happens, of course, is that what is neglected is that the work of God then is neglected. It becomes an argument rather than we actually going out and doing things for other people. And then we also know here in North America that with a decline in vocations to the priesthood and religious life, that sometimes people live in villages where there are no pastors. And there's a loneliness there too, because then one cannot get the sacraments every day. And of course, here in North America, we also have to deal with the question of clerical sexual abuse and the loneliness that victims experienced when they went to the institutions and to the leadership and they were not first believed. And then there's also people who experience the suffering and loneliness of colonial theologies where world religions were not always valued as having value in themselves. And some religions were identified as the more important ones over the others. And so people have suffered because of that. Or we have here in North America too, people who have suffered because of residential schools. So we have had situations where we've had schools where people's languages weren't respected or how they spoke wasn't respected. And there's a loneliness there too. Or people who have a disability, who cannot even move around our streets because of their disability, who then spend so much time in their apartments or in their houses alone. There's a loneliness for those who are disabled. And then there's a loneliness perhaps of being disappointed by our church leadership, that they have said something or they did not do something that was a concern for me. And there's a disappointment in terms of our leadership. We also know in our society that there's a rise of literature on loneliness. For instance, in Canada, 28% of Canadians live alone. So that's a huge rise in the ordinary living situation here. And in 2017 and 2018, the former US Surgeon General, Vic Murthy, declared an epidemic of loneliness. And the UK appointed a Minister of Loneliness to diagnose this condition. Doctors at University of California, Los Angeles, devised a loneliness scale. So this topic, loneliness, allows us in a way to engage in a dialogue with people beyond our religions, with people beyond our politics, with people beyond our citizenships, because this is a universal issue in every country. It has the potential and possibility to bring us together to try and resolve the issue, each within its own discipline, tackling the question of loneliness as a theological issue, also tackling the question of loneliness as a scientific issue. But these areas then, not speaking separately, but finding spaces to speak together, to inform each other, so that in a way, our response to what we now recognize as a actual event in our world can indeed be tackled collectively. So there are opportunities and challenges. So we can become, in the practice of walking with other people in their loneliness, and that other people walking with us in our loneliness, we can become a community of recognizers who walk together by the way of mutual accompaniment, so that rather than when my loneliness is now fixed, I don't have to have a concern for others. No, I have to have a concern for others. And that's the great invitation, the great opportunity of being a Christian, that I and my future is caught up in the futures of everybody, that we all move forward together. So if I have been transformed and by the experience of loneliness, the opportunity now for me is also to pass on like a football team, that opportunity of loneliness and the possibility of taming it in the way that I have in my own life. So the acknowledgement that we are all in a way theologians. And what I mean by that is that we are all people who are seeking a future together. We are trying to seek our way out of the COVID. We're trying to seek our way out of loneliness. So we are all, in a way, seekers. And we also believe that our own work is aided by our God. So we are all theologians in that sense. We are all students of God. We are all disciples of God, and we all move forward, aided by God. And as bearers of that word of God, so what we might think about the word of God today with respect to loneliness, that those words of God that talk about kindness and compassion, the kind of softer values that are transformative. So how do I bear compassion in my relationships? How do I bear kindness in my relationships? Because I know in the experience of my loneliness, what God gave to me was kindness and compassion. That allowed me to unlock my loneliness. And now how can I become a bearer? How can I hand on to a friend or to a stranger that same gift of kindness and compassion? And then, of course, one of the great opportunities for us now immediately, before we are even able to hand on that gift of kindness and compassion to others to aid in their loneliness, that first opportunity for us is to listen, to be able to listen to somebody who says, I am lonely. And also for ourselves to be able to have the courage to say, and the trust to a friend, I am lonely. Perhaps if that's a difficulty for us, the first step might be in our own prayer to say to God, I am lonely, and to ask God to help me to say that same word now to a friend. And once we've given it to God, it doesn't become a dangerous word anymore. It becomes a word now that I can speak, that its negative power is now even less. So I think these are the opportunities and challenges for us as Christians, but also for the entire community, for the entire global community. And I look forward to the discussion for the next while during the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. I am deeply appreciative of what you have shared right now. Just the fact that you were able to lift off the veil of the term, the negative connotations that it has, is very reassuring. And perhaps furthermore, the reassurance is the way you took the narrative from am I my brother's keeper to I am my brother's keeper in the context of the synod that we have had. You mentioned about the pandemic of loneliness, very much in congruence with, I think, what Pope Francis mentioned about not to be prophets of doom, the doom of despair. Once again, I think the key takeaway from what Gerard has shared, dear members in the audience, is not just the theological and the theoretical aspects of loneliness, but that in the practical sense, we are so much accountable for our own well-being as well as the well-being of the others. And we as religious perhaps have a greater onus to understand this at the level of the heart, not only at the level of the head. Gerard punctuated, in fact, the role of human values, how much more important that is for our communities: kindness, compassion, empathy, right? And I think way back in 2018 itself, Pope Francis had emphasized that a church which cannot listen cannot be credible. So I thank Gerard profusely for giving us this wonderful overview for what it could mean for us, especially as religious, but not only as religious, but as human persons. You know, many of our philosophers have joined, as I can see from the audience. You know, it's very, very important to perhaps make our own the words, the face of the other. You know, what many of our philosophers have also tried to kind of bring into their private domain. Our next speaker is ready, but I would like to shift the focus here and give us a sense of a context. We had conducted a survey, and I must thank the Digital Jesuits team who had prepared the survey questions. It was a generic survey with a very few questions where you had to be personally involved. The survey gives us an account of almost 570 odd respondents across the spectrum: teachers, students, ordained priests, lay people. And I think that represents a fraction of the 1.8 billion young people and their struggles in loneliness. If I may request the Digital Jesuits team to put on the results of the survey, the answers, then we could give our audience an overview of what the numbers tell us when we deal with this concept of loneliness and mental health. Once again, Gerard just broke the entire understanding. This is not just a conceptual thing, but it's something very personal. It's something that may occur to anybody and everybody, but it's not something to be afraid of, but definitely something to be talked about. So if we could have that presentation, we could look at those numbers, get a sense of these responses, which have come from the audience, many of whom are present here. And then I will give the chance to Ms. Jasmine to further elaborate her points.
So good evening, everyone. Here we present to you the response that we received from you. So basically we had 13 questions. So here we go. The first question is majority of, we received 583 responses. Majority are religious, but we are really happy we have mixture of group. Most of them are, there are 7 group of people who have responded to this response, so you can have a better view. Moving further to the second question is that, do you feel lonely? There are 36% of people who say yes, but at the same time, there are 36% who say maybe. So this will help you to know better on this question, so how we are, but there are also some who say no to this. Moving further to the next question, how often do you feel lonely? So the group feels that they feel lonely occasionally, but at the same time, 15% of them are saying that seldom to it. So we can identify here something better. Moving further, are you aware of your loneliness? People say yes. Majority says yes. Again, to the next question, how do you respond to face loneliness? The majority are saying that by distracting oneself. But at the same time, 28% of the response says by seeking help, and 17% say I ignore it. So we move further. Do you suppress the feeling of loneliness by using gadgets? And the response, most of them say sometimes, but there is a few of 26% say no, but 21% from the response with the sometimes if we add it goes more than 62%. So we can identify something there also. So next question, does loneliness affect your job profession? Here the majority say no, but if you look at the maybe and yes, they are also competing with no. So it also says us majority is also feeling that. Moving to the next question, do you share about your loneliness with someone? People say yes, but at the same time 33% of the groups feels no, but maybe there are 14% who are saying so. If we add with them to S, it comes 56%. Again, are you scared to admit that you feel lonely? People say no, so they are not scared. So this question, I don't know, the panelists will be able to speak on this. The next question, whom do you blame for your loneliness? The majority feels they blame themselves, but at the same time, 16% of the crowd feels someone, but there are also a group who feels I blame God as well. The next question, have you ever sought help to beat the loneliness? If you look at here, majority feels they haven't looked for a help, but there are few who say yes, and some say sometimes they have gone for it. And people are really interested to get into some more tips from this webinar. That's what the response is. Thank you. Ruel, you are mute.
Zubin, thank you so much. I would appreciate if you could have those slides on for a while. It's not so much as what the numbers say, but more or less how the data is applicable when we engage with it, right? For example, when you take question number 7, and the question states, do you suppress the feeling of loneliness by using gadgets? It might look like, oh, it's just below the 50% mark. It's 46.5. So, well, that seems permissible. But, well, it is not, because that's quite a chunk. And the role of gadgets during the COVID pandemic, insofar as numbing the senses have concerned, is something to be studied at great detail. So also, when we look at these numbers, the slides following that, sharing about our loneliness is perhaps a privilege that the religious structure has right from its inception. You know, even if we take Jesus, who believed in companionship, he had his disciples all around. He was able to say to Peter and those who were sleeping when he was in agony at Gethsemane, that were you not able to stay up with me? Perhaps an expression of how lonely, how abandoned he felt. But moving further, in that very slide, in that very response, I think though it's only 34.5% indicating that they do not share about their loneliness, given the entire respondees as a whole, that's quite a big number. And perhaps at our assistancy level, it has come as a policy that, you know, we need to have counseling services readily available, because I'm not too worried perhaps about the 42.2% who have access to talking about their mental health issues and happiness with somebody, but the 34.5, the 14.2, and the 9.1, they are saying something, though they are not saying something, if you get what I mean, right? So thanks a lot, Zubin. Well, we could go on about the survey reports, but like I said, how is the data applicable as we engage with it? And perhaps that will be a great contribution of Ms. Jasmine Wilson as she'll engage with other perspectives. Like I said, she's an industry practitioner, and She has been a psychotherapist in the field for more than 8 years, also the founder of Eliora Eliora Counseling Services, but more importantly, Eliora from the Hebrew for God is my light. As the psalmist said, she has been doing tremendous work as a clinical supervisor and CBT practitioner. She has a very strong theoretical orientation. And while Gerard was mentioning earlier the complexities of dealing with loneliness for people of the other gender, like the LGBTQINA, can be very, very complex and diverse. Well, Jasmine has been working with them for many, many years. And Eliora is a testament to her extensive knowledge and experience in the field of psychotherapy and counseling. I'm sure her inputs are going to be very helpful for all of us. Looking forward to an excellent presentation. Jasmine, you may proceed.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to, before I start, I want to point out something. One is loneliness is something that comes very naturally because you may be facing a crisis at any point of time in your life. So if you're a human, you're bound to experience loneliness. So it is just a state of mind. It's not any kind of a disease, or it's not it's something that you can actually talk about to people. I often see that many people carry a lot of taboo talking about their issues. But I feel that it's important to talk openly about if you're feeling lonely or if you have any other issues that could transform into loneliness. I think talking about it could be a good start. So but for now, I would be covering on 3 different aspects. Number 1 is why we think loneliness is a problem. And secondly, why do we feel lonely? And thirdly, I would also be looking at few interventions that could help you with fighting loneliness. So number 1 is when you think loneliness could be a problem. When loneliness prolongs for a long time, for example, if you feel lonely for more than 3 months or more than 6 months, that's when we tag it as a problem, especially when it's affecting your daily functioning. That's when we tag loneliness as a problem, as a mental health condition. There are 2 types of people. There are people who choose to be lonely. We call them as people, those who are engaged in voluntary solitude. They are very much comfortable in being in that space, being alone. Again, there is a clear-cut difference between being alone and being lonely or feeling lonely. So even though many people are around, there are some people who actually feel that they are alone. That's what we tag it as loneliness. So what could cause these kind of, feeling, loneliness? Number 1 is because you've had a bereavement or loss of someone that is very dear to you. The second reason could be a relationship breakup, or someone close to you has not been talking to you for a long time, or there is any kind of a conflictual relationship between both of them. Thirdly, it could be because of retirement, because of old age, where you're not really engaged enough. And it could also be because of changing jobs or change in day-to-day routine that many people may not be able to manage. Or it could also be because of some kind of isolation from co-workers or the co-community members, or going to a new place and not having any familiarity with that place or people around. So these are most of the life events that cause loneliness. And there are some kind of personal reasons as to why people feel lonely as well. Because people feel lonely because they don't have any good relationships in life, for example, good friends or good contact with family. It could be because they're staying away from family. And when people are tagged as a minority group, and when they are isolated from the rest of the group, or if they're feeling excluded from the other group, naturally by themselves or by other people, that is when they tend to start feeling lonely, and when they experience some kind of a discrimination, or when they experience some kind of a stigma from other people or from their loved ones. I've also seen that loneliness could occur from a lot of physical or sexual abuse as well. And they find it hard to, these kind of people, those who are abused physically or sexually, they find it very hard to build relationships, and the trust factor becomes something that they find it, they struggle with. So for people those who are exposed to any kind of an abuse, there is a chance of them feeling lonely, or loneliness is high. And it could also be stemming from chronic illness or any kind of a health issue, which might stop them from moving around in places. So these are some of the reasons as to why people feel lonely. But from my counseling experience, to put all of this together, what I have seen is people feel lonely when there is less sense of belonging, or lack of sense of belonging, when there is neglect from the loved ones or people they consider close to, or from their own community. They sense the feeling of loneliness. And when there is poor self-concept, or low self-esteem, or low self-image, or even there is a lot of self-blaming tendency, those kind of people tend to feel lonely. And there are also people that have issues with self-pity. They think they have they feel bad for themselves. So these are some of the reasons that I've seen. And one more, what I've seen predominantly among adults, or predominantly among people those who are in old age, I have seen people who are restricted to movement, those who are not able to interact a lot with people, those who are not able to move around freely, especially in old age. I have seen people of old age getting lonely because of reasons such as not being able to move around, or not able to talk to people freely, or not having something common to do, or lack of engagement, not being able to manage that retirement. So that's what I've seen in adults and people those who are in old age. And I have also felt that having no hope in life also leads to loneliness, and that feeling of emptiness in life, lack of purpose in life, all those kind of things makes you feel that you're off, and it slowly transforms into loneliness when you don't get it all sorted. And secondly, when we think about loneliness, different people respond to loneliness in different ways. So I have seen that a lot of people respond to loneliness by consuming a lot of alcohol. There is a lot of substance or alcohol abuse or misuse. There could be a lot of antisocial behavior and disinterest, and a lot of suicidal thoughts, ideations, past attempts, or threat to homicide. I have also seen that people lack concentration and decision-making skills. And predominantly, I have seen that people with loneliness, they have mistrust issues. And some of them are hyper vigilant, and they develop some kind of a defensive behavior. They don't let people in. And I have also seen that people tend to become more demanding in nature of others, having a lot of expectations from others, but from the society, which may not get fulfilled. So again, it's going to reinforce that loneliness. I have also seen that there is a lot of health complications associated with loneliness. One is altered brain function. Second is cardiovascular diseases, like many people get heart attack and stroke and all that. And increase in stress levels could develop anxiety issues, panic attacks, depression. Some people also develop insomnia, which is a sleep disorder, which is stimulated by loss of sleep. We could also associate that loss of sleep to use of mobile phones. because of the higher usage of mobile phones, your sleep is getting affected and your appetite is getting affected. Associating, wrong behaviors to, justifying those behaviors could also create some kind of a tiredness. Again, the people also sense a lot of tiredness and fatigue, premature aging. All these things can happen when loneliness sets in, and it is like a cycle. It could be either because of this that comes in, or because of that this comes in. So it tends to become like a cycle, like a vicious cycle. And one, whether it's important for you to get these things resolved when you feel that it's affecting your daily functioning, is what I want to emphasize. So most of the time, I have seen that people identify that they have issues with loneliness or with any other issues that they might be facing, and they most of them they are not sure how they are supposed to confront it, or how they are supposed to go about it, or how they are supposed to initiate a conversation with someone about it. This is what I've seen predominantly in many people, and they tend to develop some kind of social expectations from others, and they tend to get more demanding. When that is not fulfilled, then again it gets into that vicious cycle. So I've also seen that people intentionally distance themselves. Even if you try to get them involved when they are in that high peak of loneliness, they tend to pull themselves away. Even if you try to get them engaged into something, they show lack of interest, and they are not able to full-fledged go on or work on something or work on themselves. So these are different ways as to how people respond to loneliness. Well, most of the time, negative aspects are being emphasized, which is why I wanted to bring in a lot of interventions to give you some ideas as to how you can work with these issues like loneliness. Firstly, I see most of you are religious. I've seen in my experience with religious people, affirmations work really well. Writing a gratitude journal works really well. So affirmations to start with, such as, I'm grateful for all the many blessings that I've received in my life. And today I'm looking forward to something that I could appreciate about, or something that I could look forward to in my life today. I welcome the joy in my life. So these kind of affirmations can help you to combat loneliness. I wouldn't say this is a solution to your problem, but these interventions can be used in your own creative ways. And secondly, I was talking to you about gratitude journal. Online, you can see a lot of formats that you can write a journal on, but it is important for you to be aware of few things. For example, like, what is the best thing that has happened to me today? And who are the people that walked into my life today, and who helped me today, and who was nice to me today, and was there someone that made me smile today? Was there someone that supported me when I really needed something? Was there someone who just rubbed down my shoulder when I needed support? So these kind of things you could reflect on, and you could start your day with being grateful for all the things that you've received. Or you can even, before going to bed, you could reflect on all the things that you're grateful for. So writing a gratitude journal, or just reflecting on what are the things that happened today, would be very helpful. And secondly, I would like to emphasize on this particular thing. Bringing a regular daily routine into your life can really help you to combat loneliness. I have seen in my experience, it has been very effective. Having a proper routine, like, getting up in the morning, starting with a meditation, and start doing exercise or workout, or getting involved in some activities in your community or outside your community, or keeping yourself engaged through some sorts. Even reading books, or listening to podcasts, or listening to something that could give you inspiration, developing new hobbies, developing something, developing something about your skill set. or developing your skill set overall, or helping somebody to develop somebody's skill set. So these are things that you could do to keep yourself engaged throughout the day. Keeping yourself engaged throughout the day is the most effective way of combating loneliness. And physical exercise and workout is mandatory. If you don't have a lot of space, you don't even need to have a gym to do any kind of a physical workout. You can just do simple things like walking on 8 and doing mind gym and meditation, guided imagery. There is n number of videos available on YouTube that can help you with different techniques. Like in psychotherapy, we have a technique called emotion freedom technique, which it's popularly called as EFT. So you tap different parts of your body and you accept that part of yourself. So there are different techniques available on YouTube, and especially associated with loneliness, anxiety, depression, stress. So you can even make use of those videos in order to help yourself. I have also seen that engaging in community service has been very effective for people, those who are fighting with loneliness, and also engaging in support groups. In India, it's not very popular, but it's very popular abroad. But I think I see that most of you are religious. You can make it very well work in your own communities, identifying people with similar issues, sitting together and talking openly about it. Again, to do that, you have to build trust in that group in order for you to facilitate that social support, groups. So another
Jasmine,
thing that I have also,
Jasmine,
yes,
I'm
yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Just if I may, we are seeing a lot of people raising their hands. I do not intend to break your flow. Please hold on to that thought. I see Rahul Mani raising his hand, and also many others. I think this is a good time if you could use the chat box to pose your questions. Both Sister and Gerard are free at the moment. You can address your questions directly in the chat box. They will have a look at it. And Jasmine has about 2 minutes to wind up so that we can give the sister a chance to finish. Jasmine, please continue. I request all to use the chat box in the meantime, please.
Yes. So I was talking about keeping yourself engaged. That is very important. And I have also seen that writing your goals and visualizing your goals also helps you with a lot of introspection. And maybe when you feel overwhelmed, you could use this technique. When you feel overwhelmed, just stop, pause, reflect on what you're feeling at that point of time. What is your emotion in the here and now? What you're feeling then and there, and try to reflect on it and try to name that feeling. So naming a feeling helps you to be aware of what is going on inside. If you want, I can even share with you the feeling inventory, and it's readily available online as well. So you could try to name what you're feeling. That naming a feeling helps you to identify what issues you really have and what is creating that feeling of loneliness. I would also emphasize on being self-aware by recognizing loneliness as a sign of something that needs to be changed. I want you also to reflect on trying to understand what are the effects of loneliness in you, in your personal self, in your body, in your mind. What is the effect of loneliness that you're feeling in your life? And this will help you to understand and respond much better to loneliness. And lastly, I would like to conclude by saying that it's important to talk about your issues when you really have something to talk about. I understand there are a lot of stigmas, and it's very hard to find people that you can trust and open up. And it's I understand that you could also be worried about judgments and what people might form opinions about you. There will always be someone to lend their ear to and listen to you non-judgmentally. So try to identify people like those in your life. And even if you don't need to have issues to talk about, you can at least find somebody to talk and engage yourself with. try to find company in your life. So that's what I would like to conclude with. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, Jasmine, I think we ought to be very grateful for that candid sharing, Jasmine, and experiential sharing such as this is what brings those vivid images of people who suffer in silence. Something that popular culture has taken up very, very strongly. And very recently, Logic's number on the 1-800 to prevent teenage suicide. And also the age-old classic of REM, Everybody Hurts, and Hold On is the assurance that they give. And, you know, popular culture also identifies this generation as the loneliest generation.
Yes.
All right. I was listening to a talk that was conducted by the IIM Bangalore, where Mr. Arvind Bindra was also a panelist. And, you know, they were saying that technology has made isolation so much more easier, right? So much so that our meaningful, authentic social connections have disappeared. And that was before the pandemic. Right. And so we've got a lot to look on to. And while you were presenting, I've got a message on my WhatsApp. I was hoping that people use the chat box, but somehow we haven't seen many messages flowing in. Here's a small request from one of our viewers. Could Ms. Jasmine add these takeaway and affirmations that she has shared as a meaningful way out? Can she share it on the chat box? So, Jasmine, there's a request for you. I think there were key takeaways, especially with regard to writing down affirmations, positive journaling, right? And then you even indicated smoke detector principles, which I'm sure people in the field of psychology will know it very well. There are tiredness, loss of sleep, and a prolonged sense of not feeling well can be indicators that we need help. And perhaps these are some things that you could list them down so that people can take this away. We are really, really running behind schedule, and for good measure, because we've engaged with another side of the spectrum. I want to quickly bring in Dr. Lippy Gloria Rosario. As I mentioned earlier, she is with the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology, both in University of Dhaka as well as Notre Dame University. She has made immense contributions to various international journals as far as mental health is concerned. But moreover, there was a very recent article written by, I think, a journalist from Dhaka, where she has expressed the work that she does with Healing Heart Counseling Unit in Dhaka, if I'm not mistaken. So Sister Lippy Gloria is belongs to the Lady of Sorrows congregation. Sister, I would like you to quickly make a few comments and then perhaps take questions as and how the time permits. Sister, over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I have been noting down the data that you have exposed on the screen, you shared in the screen. And really, it struck me that 46.5% plus 20.1% people, I mean, among the respondents who are present here using the gadgets, to overcome the loneliness. So it's a kind of contradiction that these gadgets, this internet, computer, and smartphone are here to connect, but we are still feeling lonely, and we are trying to use this gadget to overcome the loneliness. But we human beings, we are social beings, and we are interdependent as people of God, but we're depending on these gadgets. And actually depending on these gadgets too much excessively is making us really lonely, because we are not interacting with the people. So what will be the healthy way of combating our loneliness? So of course we need to make social connection. Even though we are in the pandemic situation, but still how we can find a way to make social connection with the people, not only with the gadget, because when you use too much gadget, that time actually you are not interacting with the people directly. And also you lose the ability to communicate with other person. And when you are not able to communicate, that time you feel even lonely. You're alone, you know. So I would suggest that we combat the loneliness in different way. Already Dr. Gerard shared some points, also Jasmine shared, but I would also emphasize in making new connection with the people, you know, not with the chat box texting, but talking, listening, sharing, that will be important. And also I would suggest that we find our own hobbies. What are some of our hobbies that when we are engaged, like some gardening or listening to the music or having a pet in the house or in the convent or having some animals, you know, sometimes this thing helps us to combat the loneliness. And even when we, in our daily routine, we can also keep some time for exercises. Exercises not necessarily inside the house, but you go out. Because when we go out with the sunshine, we receive some kind of hormone, chemical. It's called endorphin. It's a natural chemical that we get so that we can combat our loneliness. So we shall use some of the tips so that we can feel, you know, happy inside. And of course, whatever other suggestion has been given by Jasmine, we can also follow those things, you know. So I would say, let's make more connection, interacting, you know, with human being, and that will help us, you know, to be strong inside. And when you feel lonely, you get in touch with the loneliness. And I am very happy from the data that it says 68% are aware of loneliness. It's very positive. That means we are connected with our feelings. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sister. And I respect the fact that you've taken cognizance of the time. I think what you've shared also resonates with what Gerard and Jasmine have mentioned earlier, validating some of these key points. So I want to bring in Gerard very quickly. Gerard, a quick response to the affirmations given by sister and the nuances of the points raised by Jasmine, please.
Yes, I think I think that point of experiencing our immediate physical location is a very important one, and Sister rightly connected that. I think if we go back to the statistics around the use of gadgets and how that impedes or settles loneliness is a good question. I think during the COVID, what we discovered was we needed, as a sister rightly pointed out, a level of connectivity within our social cocooning, within our social distancing, and I think all of us speakers thus far have signposted that. I think the challenge in terms of loneliness and the scale of its problem, we have to find ways of moving from connectivity to closeness. That will be, I think, the challenge of our future. And that closeness is interpersonal at one level through accompaniment. But the closeness is going to be a bigger question too. Because closeness breaks down those barriers of inequality that aggravate loneliness, such as how we're treated socially, culturally, politically, sexually, religiously. So I think that will be the challenge moving forward, is how do we create platforms, practical, and both speakers have given us great leadways on that, to move from connectivity to closeness.
Connectivity to closeness, clearly the clarion call here, Gerard. Thank you so much. I've got two questions, and I'm going to address the first one to Jasmine. Jasmine, this question reads, ma'am, especially while dealing with LGBTQ teenagers who are just coming to terms with their sexuality, how do we help them come out of their cocoon? This is one for you. If you could be very brief in answering this question, please.
Yes. Just 1 minute. Okay. So with LGBTQ people, it's first of all, it is important to build trust because most of them have faced a lot of abuse, a lot of neglect, a lot of non-acceptance from other people. So they naturally have this sense of trust issues. So it is very important for you to establish trust. I'm not sure how you can extensively help somebody, but encouraging them to visit a therapist or visit somebody who would be able to help them if they have serious issues. But if you're able to deal with those issues by yourself, talking to them non-judgmentally and just listening to them itself can help them a lot. Because most of them want to be listened to rather than, giving our ideas and opinions. Most of the time, we tend to think that people want solution to the problem. Most of the time, people don't want solution to the problem. They just want somebody to listen to. So I think something that you can practice every day is to be mindful about not giving solution to the problem, but listening to that person and allowing that person or helping that person to come out of their problem by themselves. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Yes, Jasmine. The next one also for Sister Lippy. Sister, this question states that, Sister, you've been based in Dhaka. Do you feel that there is room for more collaboration with Indian youngsters in the assistancy?
Sister, you are mute. Sister, you are mute.
Sorry. Yes, of course. Because now with the digital world, we can also have more collaboration because either for counseling, listening to each others, because we can do it online and we can start, maybe a platform how we can collaborate with each other. Yes, we can do it. Yeah.
Yes, I hope the Digital Jesuit team is taking note of this. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the last question. It is addressed to Gerard, a very pointed question. Father Gerard, as we know, many of our Jesuit priests are involved in counseling in our institutions. What opinion do you have about the role that they play, and how should their approach be towards the youngsters?
Yeah, so I think no matter what discipline we're working in, whether it's theology, psychology, social work, spiritual direction, we all share a common concern, and that is the concern of human flourishing, not just the flourishing of a single individual, but the flourishing of the collective human family. So for those Jesuits and our collaborators who are working in the area of psychology and counseling in our institutions, they provide a very key role to other religious in terms of building up the vocabulary about how we understand the question. What we discovered here this morning is, or this evening, as it were, is that there is a variety of languages, words that give description to the question of loneliness. And no one discipline has the only language. We all have to ensure that the language is pluralistic, that it brings in every possible perspective and experience, because that's significant. And in terms of how we walk with people and youngsters, I think everybody who self-identifies as experiencing loneliness is, in the first instance, a person who speaks from a place of authority, because they are giving expression to something that they are experiencing. So how we as counselors should, in the first instance, relate to that is to be in front of that and respect the authority of the person who is speaking, of the young person who's saying, I'm feeling this way. And I think if we experience and relate to their voice as an authoritative voice, our listening is going to be significantly different. Our listening will be much broader. It won't, in the first instance, try to prescribe a solution. It will want to listen to the wisdom, to the authority of that young voice.
Role, you are
Sorry.
mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks a lot, Gerard. Dear friends, this has been a very, very engaging discussion. I thank all our three panelists, Gerard, Jasmine, and Sister Lippi. Very deliberate, very meaningful. Key insight: self-care is a key to well-being. It is not the responsibility of the individual alone, and especially for those of us who take pride in running our higher education institutions, we must remember that higher education has been dubbed as an anxiety-producing machine, and how we are able to alleviate that sense of anxiety and depression, loneliness. And as we see, depression as a way of contributing to loneliness, and loneliness as a way of contributing to depression. And I think it was wonderful that none of the three speakers dealt with this in a cursory manner, did not simplify it, but rather grappled with the complexities of this. There's much to be done, but between the three of you, you have made critical call-outs for a world which takes pride in its young population, especially India, which takes pride in being a very young democracy. And many of our youngsters are in need, not of solutions to problems, as Jasmine highlighted, but as Gerard was also saying, of just compassion, kindness, and a careful ear to the difficulties that they face. Thank you very much to the Digital Jesuits team for giving me this opportunity to moderate this session. There has been very little that I've been able to contribute to this because I'm not a member of this field, but what an engaging discussion it has been. I leave very enriched by the key inputs of all our three speakers. Thank you so much. I think it was very relevant to have all of you here, especially in this anniversary of the conversion of Saint Ignatius, who himself battled the sense of loneliness, solitude, and grew out of that in participation in God's great mystery and love. Thank you once again, especially to all our key panelists.
Well, thank you, brother. Well, once again, I come to the screen and I would like to take the opportunity. And for my part, I would say that it happens that admitting one's loneliness is very something considered to be at one point very, very laughing stock. Once or when somebody expressed that, oh, you dude, you know, I feel lonely, the other person may feel with pity or would laugh at him. Oh, he's a lonely guy, a pity guy, doesn't have so many things, poor guy. Very, very sad part of the story. Well, I would like to say that I'm a lover of movies. And our favorite actor of mine is Joaquin Phoenix. He made very, very provocative and very, very thoughtful movies. The movies like Her, where the modern advanced technology tries to fill out the loneliness. And the very, very controversial movie had the Joker. And the very recent film of his that Come On, Come On, where young minds, young people, they say, very, very scared of this, the true face of loneliness. Well, they also say how to cope with the loneliness and how to fill the gap. And well, I would like to say that it is okay sometimes not to be okay. Accepting the loneliness and dealing with that and admitting it is absolutely okay. Nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to be stigmatized. And one thing we, as the speakers, they have stressed that suppression isn't the solution or the best solution for us, because it will have its own consequences. Sometimes it's very, very hard and difficult to deal with that kind of consequences. And well, also they stressed the finding a right person at the right time may be a better or the best solution to pour out and feel relief, and to give a big sigh and say, well, I have relieved it. It's not to find a solution, but to feel relief and go on, keep going. Well, on behalf of the Digital Jesuits team, I would like to express my sincere and heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all the speakers and the panelists. Dr. Gerard Ryan, SJ, joining from Canada, Ms. Jasmine joining from India, and Dr. Lipi Gloria Rosario from Bangladesh. And also Brother Val Paul for being a dynamic moderator. And I must not forget Father Joshi and his team for the technical support in the Zoom platform. And he always been with us, and we are always grateful. And when we have our own bonding and connection with him for a long time, and I'm sure it's going to be forever for us. And we are sure that our audience who have joined our program this beautiful evening have gained a lot to cope with the feeling of lonely with better solution. And I'm confident that our speakers will be happy to help whenever you are in need of the professional help from them. And we shall be in touch with each other and hope to meet you in the occasions to come. Once again, thank you so much and have a great weekend. God bless us.
Thank you, Newton. Thank you.